Welcome everyone to the Security Studies Program sort of IAP series. I'm Taylor Fravel, Director of the Security Studies Program, and our series focuses on contemporary military topics. For those of you unfamiliar with SSP, we are sort of MIT's in-house kind of educational and research unit focused on all aspects of security studies, the causes, consequences, and prevention of armed conflict, both within states and among them. One great part of our program is that every year we host 5 military fellows from the U.S. Armed Forces, and they contribute to our community in a lot of different ways, but one way they contribute is by providing talks that form this series on contemporary military topics. So our speaker today is Lieutenant Colonel Brian Novchich from the U.S. Air Force. He's going to speak on fighter fundamentals, focusing in particular on basic fighter maneuvers as the defender in a one-on-one engagement, which I feel like I could probably apply to a lot of aspects of my life, not just flying planes. So really looking forward to this, Brian. Over to you. The floor and the screen is yours.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Taylor. Good afternoon, everyone, friends and colleagues. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Brian Novchich, a call sign Stitch. I am going to take you through some fighter jet fundamentals today, specifically defensive BFM. When I say BFM, that stands for basic fighter maneuvers. Historically, I'm talking about dogfights, right? I can tell you the term basic really refers to it more as a building block mission, where we focus on key theories, key concepts that you have to master in order to perform well in other missions. But the BFM mission itself is actually can get quite advanced and is fairly treacherous as well. This picture here on the front is a picture of me on my most recent deployment just 2 years ago to Iraq and Syria. It was one of the best experiences I had, and luckily someone captured this cool picture for me. So I'm not gonna lie, I do enjoy telling people what I do for a living. It's always interesting to see the varied responses and reactions I get though. My civilian friends, like my old high school buddies that know I'm a pilot, they're like, oh yeah, I know what you do. You fly around on autopilot, you eat pizza, you drink your coffee, all that stuff. It's hilarious. I don't think I've ever had coffee or pizza on an airplane, but that's kind of their picture of what I do for a living. And then I've got my military friends, right? Maybe they're from other branches, or maybe they're just in the Air Force, but they're not pilots. And they're like, oh, you're a fighter pilot. I know what you do. You wear dog tags and you play beach volleyball, right? That's what you do. Again, 2 things I have never done: never worn dog tags and never played beach volleyball. And then there's always that sweet old lady that you meet at the shopping center, the shopping mall, and she says, "Oh, you're a pilot. I must have just seen you do the flyover the other day." No, I'm not in the Thunderbirds. I have done some flyovers, but that's not what I do for a living. What I actually do for a living, I graduated the Air Force Academy in 2003. I always wanted to be a pilot while I was there, so I majored in aeronautical engineering, which I thought was going to make me a better pilot. Turns out that's ridiculous. Being a good pilot makes you a good pilot. So I just punished myself for 4 years, but I did actually enjoy my experience there. I did fairly well in pilot training, and I tracked to the mighty F-15E Strike Eagle in 2005. In my 17 years or so in the Air Force, I've spent 13 years of that either flying or doing flight training. I did 1 year at Air Command and Staff College. I've got a couple master's degrees. One of them is from Maxwell Air Force Base there. I did 1 year of operational planning at the Combined Air Operations Center at Al Udeid. So that's in our main warfighting center, if you will. And then I've done 2 years of acquisition work at the Pentagon, where I was on the Secretary of the Air Force's Special Programs branch, and got to work with some pretty awesome folks, including some people up here at MIT. Also, I'm a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Weapons School from 2010. The Weapons School is, for those of you who don't know, it's the premier aviation school in our country. It's the top 1% of the instructor pilots will get to go to Air Force Weapons School. No offense to the Navy, Top Gun, it's 6 weeks long, right? The Weapons School is 6 months long. It's in Las Vegas. It's really focused on making sure that you're an expert in not only the tactics of your airplane, but also how to integrate all the other assets that are around you so that you can achieve the mission and the objectives there. It's also a leadership course. It's where you basically get your PhD in fighter pilot. I was the 200th graduate for the Eagle in 20 years of that school. So it's pretty outstanding accomplishment that I was able to achieve there in 2010. And then finally, most recently, before I came to MIT, I was the squadron commander of the 335th Fighter Squadron, the world's leading MiG killers, and now I'm here with you guys. So this briefing is going to take about an hour or so. I promise you're going to get something out of it. Okay, at the end of this briefing, you will absolutely have a middle school level understanding of geometry and physics. I promise you that. You will also have a PhD in coolness. Okay, and then finally, when you get to your next party, you should be able to talk with your hands and shoot your watch like a pro. Okay, so pay attention to these things I promise you will be able to do. This is what we're going to talk about. There's going to be a lot of jargon and terminology throughout the brief. I'm going to try and prepare you for it. I'm going to go through some of those key concepts, some of the controls, some of the terminology, and then I'm going to set the stage. I'm going to put you in the cockpit and kind of explain to you what it's like to be in there. We'll go through some of the defensive BFM concepts. I'll go through a few of the situations that we train to, and then at the end there, you'll actually kind of watch it happen through a video that I've got. Okay, this picture is the inside of an F-15E cockpit, the pilot's cockpit. You can kind of see here through my pointer, right? You've got the stick here, you've got the throttles down here. We got several screens, gauges, buttons everywhere. This is the heads-up display, which shows a lot of good information, so we don't have to look down. Really, what I want to focus on here, kind of the controls, is really the stick, right? So in our tech order, the flight controls is actually about 200 pages worth of reading. I'm going to boil it down to you in about 30 seconds, okay? The stick, moving it left and right, controls the ailerons, right? Which is going to roll the aircraft. So if you think about it this way, one wing goes up, one wing goes down, right? It kind of spins through the air. Think of it spinning like an arrow when you fire it from a bow. Okay, so that's what the stick left and right does. Moving the stick forward and back is going to control the stabilators, or the stabs is what we call them. This is going to control the pitch of the airplane. Put it quite simply, when I went through pilot training, stick goes forward, trees get bigger. Stick goes backwards, trees get smaller. And that's how we control the nose of the airplane. And then finally, down here, you can see kind of hidden are the rudder pedals. And this is going to control the yaw of the airplane. It's two-dimensional. Kind of think of it like when you're steering your car and you turn the wheel to the right, the nose goes to the right. That's what the rudder pedals are going to do. And those are the basics of the controls that I'm going to be talking through for today's purposes. Okay, aerodynamic forces. There's a lot of them, but really these are the key ones that you need to understand. The basics here. The first one is going to be the lift vector, okay? The lift vector is the line that's perpendicular to the wings, right? It's straight out of the top of the jet, basically where the tails are pointed. That is the lift vector. The pilot points the lift vector by rolling the aircraft to the left and to the right. Now, the lift vector there is opposed by gravity, Earth's gravity, right? So the airplane doesn't actually fly where you point the lift vector. It flies along what's called the plane of motion, right? It's the actual path the aircraft takes because gravity is pulling down opposite of the lift vector, right? So if you're, think of the Thunderbirds, or if your aircraft is trailing smoke, you're seeing the plane of motion of that aircraft. I control the plane of motion by setting my lift vector, and then I pull various levels of G-forces in order to set the plane of motion to where I want it. Okay, so that's kind of what the aerodynamic forces that you need to understand. As far as positions go, okay, in this picture we have a defender, right, which is going to be us today, and we have an offender. There is going to be a range between those two, okay? We usually talk in thousands of feet, right? Sometimes miles, but in today's purposes, it will be thousands of feet will be the range between the offender and the defender. When I mention closure, that is the rate of change in range. So high closure means that you are getting closer quickly, right? You could also have negative closure, which means you're getting further away. If you look at the offender's nose, sometimes his nose is not always pointed at the defender. So the angle between where the nose is pointed and where the defender is called the antenna Turing angle, right? Or you can think of it like the angle off the nose, okay? That'll be an important concept here shortly. The difference between where the two noses are pointing is the heading crossing angle. Not super important for today, but this one definitely is the aspect angle. So this is the angle from the target to the offender, and it's always measured from the tail. Okay, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute. So we've got angle off the nose, and then aspect angle and range. Those are going to be some key positional geometry angles for us. Okay, and finally, pursuit curves. So what you're looking at here is a picture. This is from the offender, from the pilot's point of view, right? I'm looking through my heads-up display, and then you see this W, the whiskey line. Think of it like if my aircraft nose was a laser pointer, that's where the nose of my aircraft is pointed. So if I am in lead pursuit, that means that my nose is in front of the target aircraft. What this does for me is that it decreases my range, it increases my closure, and it increases the aspect angle, okay? I'm gonna use this as the offender to get pressure on the defender, right? So I am not comfortable if the offender's nose is in lead, because that means he's shooting me with weapons and he's looking to shoot me with a gun. However, if you do this for too long, your closure and your aspect angles will get too large, and it actually gives the defender an advantage, okay? We'll talk more about that in a minute. If your nose is directly on the defender, that's called pure pursuit. It does the same thing as lead, it just does it a little more slowly, okay? This is when the offender is trying to shoot you with missiles or force the defender to make mistakes. Same kind of deal. Too much time spent in pure pursuit will eventually give the defender some advantages if you're not killing him. Okay, and then finally, lag pursuit is when your nose is behind the target. This is it's going to increase your range, right? So you're going to get farther away, decrease your closure, decrease your angles. The offender is going to use lag in order to basically control overtake and remain behind the defender. So this is all about preserving options for later on, okay? If you do this for too long though, the defender is going to take advantage because you're not putting any pressure on them, okay? So that's pure pursuit, or lead pursuit, pure pursuit, and lag pursuit, right? I hope you guys got all that because there's going to be an aero test later. Okay, let's set the stage now. Flying a fighter jet is an extremely taxing job, as I'm sure you can imagine. However, flying a high G visual dogfight is an absolute assault on your senses. When I say G, I'm referencing Earth's gravity. It's basically just a reference to Earth's gravity. So we're all sitting here at 1 G, right? You have 1 times gravity, no acceleration. The most you'll experience in like a normal day of you just doing your thing is probably about 1.5 Gs. If you're flying in an airliner, for example, those pilots will only exceed 2 Gs if it's an absolute emergency, right? Probably the closest that you'll get to feeling these types of Gs is in a roller coaster. I can tell you though that there's only 6 roller coasters in the entire country that touch 5 Gs. The most aggressive one in the entire world is actually in Texas. It's Shockwave, Six Flags Over Texas. It hits 5.9 Gs for about 5 seconds. Okay, these fights that we're doing, they're between 1 minute and 5 minutes long. We're routinely at 4 to 5 Gs, right? So it's a constant. It's the tight part of the roller coaster, and we'll actually max out at about 9 Gs for about 5 to 10 seconds at a time. Okay. What does that feel like? Okay, your arms are now 80-pound dumbbells. Okay, each one of those are now 80 pounds. Your head and your helmet are now a 90-pound sack of concrete sitting on your neck. You have a full-size adult sitting on your chest while you're trying to breathe, okay? And oh, by the way, you're operating a $60 million machine at 400 miles an hour. You're looking behind you and another highly trained operator is trying to kill you, okay? So that's the challenge that you're accepting when you go into there and you fly defensive BFM. You gotta be ready for it. So this is not me. When I did my initial training, they handed us VHS tapes. So this was in 2015. You'll see this is a student going through his initial centrifuge training. You'll see that this is the G total up here that he's going to be going through, and it'll kind of give you an idea of the strain and the forces that are at work here.
Lights on. Keep it in, keep it in. You're on top, breathe. Squeeze the legs, squeeze the butt, breathe. Drop the shoulders, breathe. There you go, get more air in, breathe. Squeeze the butt, squeeze the legs, breathe. Good job. All right, sir, you're coming down, coming down. All right, you're doing good, okay?
Yeah, and just to be sure, I don't have a cheerleader in my airplane, so that's all you're going to get at centrifuge training is a good job. A lot of people don't make it through centrifuge training first time. I passed out the first time. It takes a lot of practice and a lot of education to be able to withstand those types of forces. Okay, so let's I set the stage for you. Let's go ahead and get defensive here. So just like your grandma lived by the golden rule, you know, treat others as the way you want to be treated. There are golden rules for BFM: lose sight, lose fight, maneuver in relation to the bandit, and trade energy for nose position wisely. So for that first one, lose sight, lose fight, we have a lot of sensors in the airplane that are really good at picking up aircraft beyond visual range, right? But that doesn't help you when you're within visual range. You got to do it with your eyeballs, okay? And if you're not looking outside and you don't see the other aircraft, you will lose that fight. There's just no way to win, okay? Maneuver in relation to the bandit, really what that means is you cannot have a pre-planned set of maneuvers. You can't go out with a pre-planned game plan. Every action has a specific and correct reaction. And if you don't see the action, you will not choose the correct reaction. And then finally, energy, you know, we live in a negative piece of S world. What that means is that my aircraft is not perfectly efficient. When I maneuver, I lose energy. So I need to know when the right time to keep energy is and when the right time to lose energy is by maneuvering. So for defensive BFM, the tactical objectives that we have for every engagement is that I want to defeat the initial attack. If I am able to defeat the initial attack, I want to deny follow-on attacks. If I can do that, eventually I want to neutralize that bandit by no longer becoming defensive, or I actually want to go offensive and change the roles and kill that guy. So those are our tactical objectives that we train to in every engagement. Okay, so to defeat the initial weapons attack, you have to know your adversary's weapons capabilities, right? Part of being a professional fighter pilot is not just knowing everything about your aircraft, it's knowing everything about the aircraft that you're fighting as well. So if you see here, this is called a Wes diagram, right? It stands for weapon engagement zone. Okay, you've got the defender here, kind of in the middle. These that Y and X axis are range. And then you have those aspect angles, right? We talked about from the defender's tail to 0, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, up to 18. So these blue, red, and green lines, it's unclassified. So this represents the minimum ranges at those aspects of 3 random different weapons, okay? So the key is knowing what the minimum range is, at what aspect those weapons will work and won't work, okay? Now, most weapons, you can kind of see from the diagram here, they're designed to work the best from behind and from a low, kind of a low aspect, right? That's where the sweet spot is when you're trying to shoot. They work less well when you're higher aspect, higher angles, okay? The reason is that every weapon, for safety purposes, when you shoot it, it has a specific amount of time that it needs in order to fire from the aircraft, find the target, start guiding, and then fuse. And if you don't give it enough time, it's not going to work. So that's really what the minimum ranges are based off of. So the offender's job, really what he wants to do is he wants to fly anywhere he can where he can employ those weapons and they'll work. Okay, as the defender, we want to change our lift vector, our G, our plane of motion, our airspeed, our altitude, whatever we can to put that offender in a position where he is not able to take those shots. In this case, he is now at a high enough aspect that he no longer has a shot. He's inside of his minimum range, okay? So what that kind of boils down to is usually the right answer is you keep turning into him and you bring him in closer. I feel like I shouldn't have to tell you that though, because the greatest fighter pilot ever has already told you this.
Bandit, move! There's a MiG undertail! There's a MiG undertail! We've got a problem here. We've only got one missile left.
Approaching 110 miles, sir.
God damn it. I got him! I got him! He's right on us! He's between our tails! Shit! You haven't lost him! He's still with us! What are you doing? You're slowing down! You're slowing down! I'm bringing him in closer, Merlin. You're gonna do what? This is it, Maverick! I'm gonna hit the brakes, he'll fly right by. Shit, he's gonna get a lock on us! Now! I got a good lock. Firing.
And the rest is history. Awesome. Thank you, Maverick. Okay, so a good fighter pilot is going to know on the offensive, he's going to know that he can't just shoot. Okay, he wants to get, it's not just about killing, it's about maneuvering to a specific place called the control zone. Okay, so what you see here in this diagram is you have the defender here, right, the blue. This is his turn circle, right? This is basically the ground track that he's going to fly as you look down based on his turn performance. Behind him is this zone called the control zone, okay? This is the place where the offender can keep pressure on the defender and he can transition through all of those weapons easily, right? He's got all the weapons really available to him. We define that control zone based on some ranges and some angles, right? So the control limit is the front of that control zone, okay? It's at 2,500 feet at about a 2 aspect or 20 degrees of aspect, okay? If you're inside the control limit, then the offender basically is at the minimum ranges, so he can't shoot anymore, and he can't react quickly enough to the defender maneuvers, right? As Maverick just showed us expertly there, right? He cannot react quick enough. The back edge of the control zone is called the pressure limit. So if you're further than about 4,500 feet, or about a 4 aspect back here, then you're not aggressive enough, and that's going to allow the defender time to either regain energy or create more problems for you. So that is the control zone, okay? Now, we don't actually have a control zone floating behind the aircraft, right? So you have to actually use visual cues to know what that looks like outside. And really, we're talking about aspect and the angle off, right? So as I'm looking behind me, I can see those 2 aspect cues for the front at the 2 aspect control zone and the back of the control zone at 4. The 2 is about, in an eagle, is about where the top of the tails is, and the 4 aspect is about where the wingtip is, or 2 times the tails. So I can see this area right here, that guy is in my control zone based on the aspect. The angle off the nose is similarly kind of easy to determine, right? If he is pointed at me, he has 0 angle off the nose, which means he's probably shooting me right now. Okay, if you see that an offender that's wider than he is long, it's about 20 to 30 degrees of antenna terrain angle or angle off the nose. That means that he's probably right there in the control zone and he's going to be shooting fairly quickly. So you need to do something about it. Down here at that kind of 45 to 60 degrees, this is a good defensive picture, right? So the offender is kind of a square aircraft. So he's equal width and length. And basically it means that he doesn't have any of his weapons available just yet. So those, when you're looking behind you, those are the angles you need to recognize as visual cues. Okay, so we know what weapons he has. We know where he can use them. We know what the control zone looks like. Now we need to max perform our jet in order to keep him out of the control zone, okay? What we're looking at here is an energy management diagram, or EM diagram. So what you have here on the bottom is you have our aircraft speed, right, in knots. You've got our turn rate here in degrees per second, and you have our turn radius here in thousands of feet, okay? So the blue dotted line represents our turn rate. The red solid line represents our turn radius. Now this is the instantaneous rate and radius diagram. So what this means is that it's a snapshot in time. So this is how, if we use the energy we have right now, this is the turn performance I can get at that one point in time. When I say energy, I'm referring to kinetic energy, right? So this is our airspeed. So airspeed is our kinetic energy, and also potential energy, which is our altitude. Both of those combine to equal energy available to me to maneuver with. A key assumption in this diagram, though, is that we're losing energy as we're turning, okay? So I'm gonna start as high on this diagram as I can, but then I'm always sliding left because I'm losing airspeed as I maneuver, okay? What this gives us is it gives us kind of a box, right? So 430 knots is what we call our tactical corner velocity. So what corner velocity is, it's the airspeed that we can get our maximum rate and our best radius at that given time. So in an Eagle, 430 knots is where I want to start my maneuver. I'm going to start sliding left because I'm bleeding energy, but I don't want to go any lower than about 220 knots. As you can see at 220, this is where my turn rate drastically drops off and my radius drastically starts opening up. So that kind of gives me that window. Based on this, I know my performance in my aircraft, I can generate about 12 to 18 degrees per second for a little while, and I can turn at about 2,000 to 3,000 foot radius, okay? And I know how to compare that to other aircraft that I fly against. This diagram here looks similar, right? But this is our sustained performance, okay? So we don't always want to be bleeding energy. Sometimes we want to keep our energy. So what this does is it shows us at a specific airspeed, what can I keep, what can I hold and maintain and expect that performance to be. In this case, I kind of have those same limits, right? For about 430 knots, if I'm too fast, it's going to hurt me. If I'm slower than about 220 knots, it's not good. So I know that I want to stay during my fight somewhere between 430 and 220 knots. The difference here is that I'm only turning at about 9 to 12 degrees per second, and my turn radius is a lot bigger. It's 4,000 to 7,000 feet. So that's the difference between my instantaneous performance and my sustained performance. The key, like I said, in those golden rules of thumb, I have to know when to trade energy for performance. If you just do it whenever, you're going to lose. Okay. We don't fly with these diagrams in the cockpit. So you have to know how to use the aircraft feel to kind of figure out where you are on that diagram. We really use the angle of attack to figure this out. So you start with the chord line, right? That kind of that laser pointer of the nose, right? Well, where you're pointed is not always where you're flying. So the direction of the aircraft is usually going to be different, right? And that direction to travel is wherever the opposite of wherever the wind direction is coming from. The difference there is that angle of attack, okay? Think of it like when you hold your arm, your hand outside the window when you're driving down or driving in a car, right? If you are holding your hand perfectly in line with the wind, right? It's like slipstreams, very smooth, right? Preserving a lot of energy. As soon as you tilt your hand up, you feel a lot of that push and your handles start to shake. The same thing happens to the aircraft, right? And that is the angle of attack. The smaller my angle of attack is, that means the less I'm turning and the more energy I'm sustaining, right? Because I'm nice and streamlined. The larger my angle of attack, it means that I'm turning more, which is good for maneuvering, but it's creating a lot more drag, right? So I'm losing a lot more energy. You can see in this picture, that's a very high angle of attack, right? You can tell because of all this, we call it snot coming off the wings, right? That's airflow separating off the aircraft because of how high the angle of attack is. The way it feels, it's very hard to describe, right? But the way it feels is very, very important because you're usually looking behind you and you can't see what your angle is. So if you want to accelerate in the Eagle, the best angle of attack is about 8 to 10 degrees, right? It feels light in the seat. So like when you're in an elevator and you hit the down button, for that first second where it starts going down, that's what it feels like. You're a little bit lighter than normal. You kind of feel like that. You're a little bit of free falling. That is your best acceleration maneuver. If you want to sustain your turn, that long turn energy, It's about 18 to 22 degrees angle of attack, and it feels the aircraft has a light buffet on it. So it's like when you're driving over a gravel road. That's what it feels like when you're sustaining your energy. If you want that maximum performance, right, that max rate min radius, losing energy, it's a moderate buffet, which it feels like you're driving over railroad tracks, right? It's thump, 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 right? The jet is kind of shaking like you're driving over railroad tracks. And then finally, if you are right at the limit of stalling your airplane, it feels like elephants are jumping on your wings, right? And those are kind of the feel that you have to go with all those different angles of attack. Okay, I think that covers most of the kind of basic concepts that will help you understand what we're going to discuss in the fights. So we really have three generic defensive situations that we train to. I'm going to talk to two of them. I won't talk to the third one, but the first one we'll talk through is a long range pickup, right? So if you pick up the offender more than 9,000 feet away, so about 1.5 miles away, that is a long range visual engagement, right? And we'll talk through our game plan there. We're going to break, we're going to sustain our energy, and we're going to assess. The second situation I'll talk through is 6,000 foot BFM, medium range. And this is where you're going to break, but you're going to do a max performance turn and assess, okay? And then finally, the one we won't talk to is short range BFM. It's absolutely insane. The way we describe it is basically like you're in a knife fight inside of a phone booth, okay? It's kind of what this feels like. And really, you're just trying to avoid bullets and forcing overshoot. So those are the three situations we train to. Okay, the first one, like we said, 9K defensive BFM. So the offender is 9,000 feet away from you. Okay, so you see the Wes diagram back down here. He's 9,000 feet away from you. He's at a 4 aspect angle, which means at the beginning of this fight, he has all of his weapons available to him. All of his missiles are available to shoot. He's still too far away to shoot his gun, but he's definitely in an offensive position. Okay, the problem here is that even though he's offensive, he is well outside of your turn circle. He's well outside of your control zone, right? So like we said, a good offender doesn't just want to shoot to kill. He wants to push the fight. He wants to get to the control zone so that you have no other options. So as the defender, our game plan for this fight is that we're going to execute a break turn. We're going to defeat those initial shots. We're going to generate the maximum angles that we can, and we're going to assess what he does, okay? This picture on the right, you're going to see this a lot, okay? This is, it's the view from the top down, right? So God's eye view. The blue is the defender, which is going to be us. The red is the offender, the bad guy, okay? Each of the arrows represents the aircraft's position at a snapshot in time, and the line is the ground track that it takes from one point to the next, okay? So you can see the first arrow is where we started, and then the line to the second arrow is where they are at the next snapshot in time, okay? So we're going to do this throughout these fights. The break turn. So all these fights start with a break turn. A good break turn is absolutely critical to surviving the first few seconds of any engagement and also setting yourself up for success for the long term of this fight. What it could sound like, right, in the heat of the moment, it'll be a radio call most likely. Chief 1, break right, Bandit, tally, you're 5 o'clock, 1 mile, slightly low. Okay, that told me everything I need to know. I need to break right. I know that the Bandit is a mile away. I know where to look, 5 o'clock in terms of the clock positions, and I know he's slightly low. Okay, when I get the break turn, the first thing I need to do is I need to check my airspeed, okay? Remember we said on that instantaneous energy diagram, our corner velocity, our best turn velocity is right around 430 knots. So as a pilot, if you're cruising around and you're not at 430 knots, you're rolling the dice, because if you get rolled up right there, you are not at your best fighting airspeed. So we typically like to fly around at about 430 to 450 miles an hour. Once I've checked that I'm at the right airspeed, now it's time to get into the break turn. So I'm going to roll, I'm going to set my lift vector right on that Bandit, right? So again, it's important that you know where he is, that you see where he is. Okay, if you don't see him, you're going to have a hard time fighting him. And you can see here, we have that lift vector pointed right at him. Once I set that lift vector, I'm going to smoothly but very quickly pull that stick backwards to about the 3/4 aft position, right? So I can't go all the way back, If I do that, I'll break the airplane. So I'm going to go back to about 3/4 of the stick travel, and then I'm going to pause there for a second. We'll talk more about that in just a second. While I'm doing that, I'm releasing countermeasures, because more than likely, in the time that I've picked him up and made that radio call, he's probably shooting me, okay? So we're going to release chaff, which are little metallic slivers that are designed to defeat or confuse radars. And then we're also releasing flares, which are designed to defeat or confuse infrared heat-seeking missiles, okay? So we put out those countermeasures while we're rolling and setting that initial pull. Now that pause at the 3/4 aft stick position, like I said, depends on your fuel weight, okay? We fly a big jet. The Eagle is a big airplane. It's called a flying tennis court because it is literally as big as a tennis court is. We carry a lot of fuel. That fuel changes the center of gravity and the aerodynamic center of your airplane. So you have to know how that affects you. If you're still very heavy, so you have more than 15,000 pounds of fuel, you can actually go straight back to the seat pan, right, all the way back, and you won't break the airplane because it's very sluggish, okay? If you have between 10 and 15,000 pounds of gas, you have to pause for about a half second. And if you have less than 10,000 pounds of gas, you're actually pretty light. You need to pause for about a second before you go all the way back to the full aft position. When you eventually do go back to the full aft position, we're listening to the overload warning system, right? So this is it's an automated voice that basically tells you if you're getting too close to the structural limits of the airplane. Okay, we have beeps, right? So it goes beep, 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 beep when you hit about 90% of the structural capacity, and then it goes beep, 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 beep when you hit about 95%. Okay, so if you do a good brake turn, you actually want to hear some of those beeps because it means you're max performing your airplane. Kind of the 8.5 to 9 Gs is what you're looking for. Okay, that whole turn, even though I talked through it in about a minute, this is basically what it looks like in real time. Okay, if you look here at the okay, you're gonna go roll, set, pull, beep, 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 brake turns over. That's how quickly that's gonna happen. Okay, and then you need to be on to the rest of your fight. Here's a picture. This is from a red flag video. If you've seen Operation Red Flag, it was a movie that came out. This is a guy doing what I would say is a pretty weak brake turn, but you kind of see the mechanics of it and what that looks like.
Chaco 2, what's your status?
So you can see there, he was looking outside. You can see he was having a tough time finding the Bandit because he wasn't really pulling very hard. But you can see there he's turning and he's putting out those countermeasures. That's an example of the brake turn that starts the fight. Okay, so you break into the offender. He essentially has 3 options for what he's going to do. Okay, this is the first option where he follows you, but he follows you early. Okay, he's staying aggressive. Man, at this point, his hair's on fire. He's got his fangs out. He's wanting to kill you. Okay, this sounds bad, but it's actually a mistake that you can capitalize on as the defender. Okay, when you're looking at him, the cues here, when you see that other aircraft, is that he's going to stay pointy. He's not flying towards your tails. He's flying towards your nose. Okay, so when you see that, you're going to tighten up that turn, that moderate buffet, right? Driving over the railroad tracks. You're going to continue to flare because he's probably trying to shoot you until he reaches that minimum range. And then you're getting ready for gunshots, right? So what you're going to do is when he is probably around 3,000 feet, for me visually, when I look at the airplane and I can see the dark intakes and I can see pylons underneath his wings, I know he's at about gun range. So when I see that, I execute my gun's defense. You see in this diagram here, the gun's maneuver, how aggressive it is, really just depends on what aspect he's at, right? In this case, because he was very aggressive, he's probably up here around your 3 or 9 o'clock position, okay? So if that's the case, it doesn't take very much to defeat a gunshot. You know what it's called when a bullet misses you by an inch? It's called a miss, okay? It doesn't matter how much it misses by. If it misses, it misses, okay? So what you want to do is you really just use your rudders while you're in that turn. All you have to do really is just drop the nose a little bit. So you just put a little bit of bottom rudder down it'll drop your nose just enough so that those bullets will fly just above you and it'll be a miss. The further towards your tail he is, the more aggressive you have to make that maneuver. So some of those will be, you'll have to actually roll upside down and pull to get out of the way of those bullets, okay? But that's, if he goes early, cool, man. All I have to do is defeat that bullet by 1 inch. And then most likely you're gonna have a couple options here as the defender. If he tries this, he's going to overshoot you, right? He's gonna fly past you. So when that happens, your first option is, hey, you can be like Maverick, right? I'm gonna do a reversal maneuver, right? I'm gonna hit the brakes, he's gonna fly right by. If you feel like that's the right maneuver, this is the time where you could actually reverse. You can become the offender and you can kill him, okay? If you don't feel comfortable doing that, then you can apply option B here, which is that you're just gonna keep your turn coming. You're gonna regain some of that energy you just lost, and then he's gonna fly past you, and those turn circles are gonna get misaligned, right? Your turn circle's right here, his is gonna be way out here. And we'll talk about misaligned turn circles here on the next slide, okay? But those are kind of those two options if the offender goes early and is too aggressive. The second option, after you do that brake turn, is, hey, you know what? Maybe the offender, maybe he's a little smarter. Maybe this guy has actually had some training. He knows that he needs to reduce those angles. He knows that he needs to fly to your control zone. But you know what? He just missed it. Maybe the sun was in his eyes, whatever. Maybe, you know, his phone just rang. Just kidding. We don't fly with phones in the cockpit. But the point is, he just misses it, right? He flies past your turn circle. The visual cue, if he goes late, is that he's going to fly to your tails. He's going to be very difficult to see because he's going to be well behind you. If you see that the offender goes late, what you're going to do is you're going to tighten up that turn, and you're going to try and maintain that minimum turn radius, okay? And that minimum airspeed. Remember, no slower than about 220 knots. And what that's going to do is it's going to set you up for these misaligned turn circles, like I mentioned. Remember, the first time he was pointed at you, he was at a 4 aspect. This time, he's about a 9 aspect, right? That means you're winning, okay? Your angles are getting larger. It's becoming more difficult for him to shoot you and to get to your control zone. So that's why misaligned turn circles are good for a defender, because the more he keeps pointing at you, it gets worse every time for him, okay? So this is a good situation for us. We need to just defeat this shot again, and then if he keeps trying it, eventually we're gonna end up behind him. Okay, so that was option 2. If he goes late, bad on him. Option 3. This is just not your day, okay? The offender does an on-time follow-through, right? So he wants to reduce the angles, and he executes his delay perfectly. So he does a brake turn and perfectly aligns his turn circle onto yours, okay? The visual cue for this is that you're gonna see him roll out momentarily, and then you're gonna see him match your brake turn. And when he does that, that's not good, okay? Because he solved the initial problem that you gave him. What that's going to look like after he does that is that he's going to be about 4,000 to 5,000 feet behind you. He's going to be at that 4 to 5 aspect, okay? His turn circle is going to be aligned with yours, but he's not quite pointed at you yet. His nose is about 45 degrees behind you in lag, okay? But what this means is that we're going to execute a rate fight, okay? The rate fight is the correct way to fight now that he's gone on time. So what is a rate fight? He's not quite in your control zone yet. He's not quite able to shoot you yet. So all else being equal, whoever generates the best turn rate, so degrees per second, over the next 30 to 60 seconds is going to win this fight, okay? So to me, this sounds like sustained energy performance, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna ease our turn or tighten our turn as required to stay right in that sweet spot. 350 to 400 knots, right? That sweet spot is gonna get us about 10 to 12 degrees per second. And we can hold that for as long as we have gas, okay? So that is our initial game plan for the rate fight. And then we're gonna look back and we're gonna assess, right? If the offender is winning this rate fight, then his nose is gonna start rotating towards you, right? So he started about 45 degrees off, and then he's at 30, and then he's at 20. This is a bad sign, right? It means that his turn rate is better than yours and you are going to lose. So our game plan is if our rate fight is not working, then we're going to change the fight to a nose position fight. And I'll talk more about that when we do our 6K. If you look behind him, you could be winning though, right? If you're flying a better sustained performance, then his nose is going to remain stationary, or it could actually rotate further away, right? So he could go from 45 off, maybe now you see 60 degrees off. This is good, you're winning. A good offender is not going to let that happen though. He's going to also change the fight and he's going to execute what's called a lead reposition, okay? So the lead reposition, okay, what that means is that if you see the diagram here, okay, is that the offender, he's going to use the altitude below him and he's going to use Earth's natural gravity, right? We call it God's G, okay? So instead of fighting gravity, he's going to use gravity to increase his turn rate and to put his nose in lead, right? So what you see here is that the red line gained angles and gained turn performance because he used his nose below the horizon and used Earth gravity. What we're going to see visually here is that the nose is going to dip below the horizon and he's going to travel downhill, okay? When you see that, you have to recognize it quickly and you have to immediately counter it by doing the exact same thing. So basically you just copy the maneuver. You see his nose drop low, you drop your nose low, and you're going to freeze him in that spot, okay? If you do it correctly, he won't move and he'll get frustrated and he'll have to do another one. And he'll continue this and you just repeat the counter maneuver as necessary until you have to do something else, right? So that's the lead reposition and that's how you counter it as the defender. Eventually, you're going to run out of altitude, right? You can only do so many altitude maneuvers before you run out of altitude, okay? And we call that reaching the floor. The Navy calls it the hard deck, right? We call it the floor. In training, for safety purposes, it's 5,000 feet above the ground or above water level. That's where we simulate the ground exists, okay? Obviously for safety reasons. In combat, there is no floor. Just don't touch the dirt, okay? The dirt has a 100% probability of kill, unlike the Bandit that's behind you. So as you're reaching the floor, you just want to bring your nose back up to level flight. And at this point, you want to hope that you maintained your energy better than he did because there's no other places to gain energy, okay? You just continue this cat and mouse game until somebody dies, somebody runs out of fuel, until he's out of weapons, or until somebody gives up and runs away bravely to fight another day, okay? So you really have to use that altitude smartly because once you get to the floor, the game is up, okay? But that's how you execute long-range BFM. It's the keys to success here are a solid brake turn. You want to generate the most angles you can, and then you want to smartly preserve your energy and only turn as required to keep him out of that control zone. And hopefully you end up with more energy than he does at the end. That is the long-range BFM. Okay, faster and funnier. 6K. Okay, this is our medium range setup. All right, so in this case, instead of 9,000 feet away, the offender is 6,000 feet away. You see in the diagram here, he's still at a 4 aspect. So he still has all of his missiles available. The problem now, though, is that he is much closer. He's in a perfect position that he can shoot and then enter your control zone at the end of that brake turn. So as the defender, our game plan is still to generate that brake turn, generate that maximum turn rate, and assess. We're just going to have to do it a lot quicker than we did last time. The offender has the same 3 options. He can follow you early, he can follow you late, or he can follow you on time, okay? And all the cues are just the same, right? Early looks exactly the same. He's gonna be fangs out, he's gonna be aggressive. Look for that guns defense. We already talked about that. If he follows you late, it's the same visual cue. He's gonna be hard to see, back behind your tails. We're gonna misalign the turn circles. It'll probably become a long range fight like we did in the 9K. We already talked about that. The third option is really where it gets interesting, okay? He's on time, right? Again, this is not your lucky day, okay? He drives to your turn circle, he matches your brake turn. What's gonna happen here is that he will end up exactly on your turn circle. He'll be about 3,000 to 4,000 feet behind you, about a 3 to a 4 aspect, about 30 degrees in lag, he's right in the middle of your control zone. If you guys remember, that is bad, right? Boom, he's right there, bad. He can shoot all of his weapons and he can drive the fight, okay? So our game plan at this point is not to fight a rate fight like we did previously. We're gonna fight a nose position fight. Here's the difference, okay? In a nose position fight, the offender has already solved all the problems that we gave them, okay? And we don't have time to fight a rate fight. We don't have time to win with energy. If we don't do something in the next few seconds, we're going to die, okay? So we are going to maneuver our nose as aggressively as possible, hence the nose position fight. We're gonna tighten up our turn, the deep buffet, right? So elephants jumping on your wings. We're gonna dispense those countermeasures we talked about. And then we're gonna look to do an out of plane maneuver, right? When I say out of plane, right? The plane of motion of the fight right now is level. We're gonna change the plane of motion of this fight to be vertical, okay? What we call that in the Air Force, at least, we call it a ditch maneuver, a ditch, okay? And you'll see here, we basically execute this very vertical maneuver and we totally change the direction where this fight is going. We're gonna check our altitude because we're gonna roll upside down and we're gonna pull straight for the ground, okay? We need to have at least 5,000 feet to the ground in order to do this maneuver. Otherwise, we risk running into the ground, okay? Maverick is gonna expertly demonstrate this for us here, right? So you'll see him, he's gonna roll upside down, boom, he's gonna do an aggressive brake turn and basically point down towards the ground. That is a ditch maneuver. When you execute the ditch as the defender, what you're hoping is that this is just one more chance for the offender to screw something up, okay? We did a brake turn to start the fight. This is another brake turn, just in a different direction. So he has the same options available to him. He could follow that brake turn early, he could follow it late, or he could follow it on time, okay? If he follows through your ditch early, as in he just rolls upside down and follows you through, he will overshoot, right? There's no good way to maneuver against that. He's going to be too pointy, he's gonna fly past you, and if you're lucky, he may even hit the floor, okay? So this is good for you. All you need to do is make sure that you're dispensing countermeasures so that you're not getting shot before he dies. If he follows you late through the ditch, okay, the visual cue here, as you see in the picture, is he's gonna be well behind you. He's not pointed at you, he's back behind the tails. This is good because there's a lot less pressure on you, okay? You just went from a really bad situation to, okay, this is not so bad. And what you can do is you can ease off, you can get some of the energy back now that you're at the floor. Worst case scenario, you're fighting against Maverick, who knows? He follows you perfectly on time through your ditch, right? It's gonna look just like this picture. He's gonna be exactly where he was before the ditch started. If this happens, the fight is probably over. He's done everything, he's countered everything you've given him. This is where we basically say, just flip and flop like a fish on dry land. Just try and do something that's gonna confuse him. More than likely, you're gonna be out of options at this point as the defender. This is what it's gonna look like. This is what the offender is gonna look like. If he follows your ditch perfectly and you're out of room, this is gonna be you getting shot and getting killed, right? So he's lining up this is a funnel for the gun. He's got his weapons targeted right on you. And this is the point where the bullets are impacting your aircraft. So that was an unsuccessful ditch and he's out of energy, he's out of room, and now the fight is over. Okay, what we're gonna show you now is, this is a video of a Navy F-18 pilot. Let me see here what I wrote down. Basically, this is what I can assume is a 6K defensive fight, right? So this is a nose position fight. And I'll talk through it as it unfolds. I'll give you some of those, I'll kind of narrate through it. What I'll say up front is that this guy needs to get his mask refit. His mask is way too loose. He can end up fidgeting with it all the time. He needs to get his straps fixed. So he's kind of a mess right here, but it shows you kind of how aggressively you need to maneuver and how difficult it is to continue to look around and find that guy. The initial brake turn, right? So you'll see him set his lift vector and you'll see that initial aggressive pull. Okay, he's looking, he's trying to see. Okay, here you can see he does a ditch because he's losing the fight. He's gonna try and find that guy. He's up in the sun right now. He's going to execute a second ditch because he has enough altitude. So here's a second vertical maneuver. And now he's basically easing up and he's trying to maintain his energy. He's fiddling with his straps a lot. He's trying to maintain his energy. You'll see the off fender is going to flow behind him here in a second. Okay, where did he go? I don't know. Oh, my strap is falling down. Okay, there's the off fender. Now I'm going to turn back towards him because you always want to turn into the off fender. Okay, and right now he's just trying to maintain his airspeed. You'll see right here, he's about to get shot, so he's going to increase his turn here. There you go, he's tightening down to defeat that shot, and then you'll see the off fender. Now he's well behind him, he's not pointed at him. So that was a pretty good example of a defensive fight where he was able to maneuver aggressively, he was able to use his altitude effectively, and he was able to keep the off fender well outside of his control zone. Cool, you guys heard me all right on that one? Perfect. Okay. In case you don't believe anything that I just told you, the last video that we're going to watch here, this is actually a quick war story, a real life dogfight that happened in Desert Storm. You're going to hear from Colonel Cesar Rico Rodriguez. He's an F-15 pilot. He has 3 air-to-air kills, which is the closest anybody has come to being an ace since Vietnam. So this guy is legit in the fighter pilot world. In this story, he'll mention a lot of the concepts and the thought processes that I've walked you through, and hopefully you can pick up on them. So I'll make sure the volume's back up here. You can listen to his war story.
January 1991, Operation Desert Storm. Colonel Cesar Rodriguez tries to avoid being shot down by an Iraqi MiG-29.
We assumed that this guy was the biggest, baddest dude on the block, and we had to be on our #1 A game to beat them.
The incoming MiG is just seconds away from blowing Rodriguez out of the sky.
The MiG's radar can see me, and so I go strictly into the defensive mode.
Rodriguez banks left and dives down fast. If he can confuse the MiG's radar, he might have a fighting chance.
MiG-29 radar is meant to look into a blue sky where there's very little clutter. So I want to force his radar to look down into the ground environment, and now the radar's got to recalculate the math to deliver a weapon.
Rodriguez must escape the Iraqi MiG's deadly grasp, or risk losing everything.
I'm in 100% survival mode because the enemy's locked onto my airplane. That's as vulnerable as you get in the air-to-air dogfight.
Unless his wingman acts quickly, Rodriguez doesn't have a chance.
At that point, I am in the pure defensive mode, and now I turn it over to my wingman, who is about 3 miles behind me. He sees the same thing that I see. He locks the lead MiG and then takes a shot with his AIM-7.
Seconds later, Rodriguez's wingman's heat-seeking AIM-7 missile reaches the MiG.
The end result was we had 1 MiG down. Splash 1 is the radio call that I made.
Splash! Splash coming out westbound!
And now we're trying to figure out what's next.
What's next is more trouble. The E-3 AWACS alerts Rodriguez to another MiG-29 just 10 miles away. This time, Rodriguez and his wingman won't be caught off guard.
We have 2 options. We can turn south and run away, or we can turn north and fight our way through that MiG. And the option that I selected was to fight our way through that MiG.
Rodriguez and the MiG face off in an intense aerial spiral, chasing each other's tails. Suddenly, the MiG-29 flies down toward the desert floor, trying to outmaneuver the F-15's radar.
At that point, I suspected the MiG felt that I could either be coming in for a gunshot or I could be getting ready to hit him with a missile.
Rodriguez watches the MiG take a hard turn back up, but it's too late to escape the momentum down.
You can see his afterburners are cooking. You know, he's trying to do everything he can to bring the nose of his airplane through the horizon, but it doesn't happen. He put himself in a no-win solution, which ultimately translated into a fireball on the ground. It wasn't until after the final engagement that I started to reflect on, wow, what just happened? Because I knew I was within seconds of being a casualty.
Man, I love a good war story. Okay, some key takeaways from the brief here. Really, these are the kind of things that that are most important in this arena, right? And this, you have to be physically prepared every time that you fly. The human body is the weakest link in a fighter aircraft. The human body is absolutely the weakest link. If you're dehydrated, you're going to pass out. If your muscles are not strong enough, you won't be able to move when you're under high G. If you don't keep your body in the right posture, you're going to hurt your back or hurt your neck. You have to be mentally prepared every time you fly. Every situation you have to be prepared for. Your reactions, they have to be instinctual, right? They need to be second nature. You don't have time to look outside, see what's happening, and then reference a manual or ask somebody on the radio what you need to do. So preparation is absolutely the key. Never give up. You know, we train to the worst case scenario. And you know, you heard from Rico's war story there, is that you have to do everything you can to survive, even for 1 more second, 10 more seconds, 30 more seconds, even if you know you're going to lose, because that might be the difference between how much time your wingman needs to come in and kill that bad guy. We train 1 against 1, but that's not how we fly. In combat, we don't fly as a singleton, right? So you're always going to have somebody there backing you up. So don't ever give up. Just continue to fight until the very, very end. And then lastly, you know, the rules that we train to, they're written in blood. You know, every training limit, every restriction is there because someone paid the ultimate price to find that limit. So our mission is very hazardous, but if you follow the tactics that we've laid out, the tactics are inherently safe. So it's the way that we can safely train to a very dangerous mission. The pilots that we don't have time for in our community are the ones who think it's a flying club and who just want to go out and break things and be crazy. That's how you get people killed. So we do a dangerous mission, but we do it very safely. And finally, a quote from the actual greatest fighter pilot of all time. It's not Maverick, sorry. Robin Olds. I'll let you guys read this quote. But really, you know, it sums up the mentality that you have to succeed and survive in this kind of environment. So this is kind of one of the more famous quotes of Robin Olds. So what I'll do is I'll take some questions, and then once questions are over, if you guys all get up, walk outside of building E40, there's a bus waiting to take you to a jet. Oh wait, nobody's at E40. All right, never mind. We'll just do questions then. Sorry, no aircraft.
Wonderful, Brian. Thanks so much. No, 10 demerits for that last swipe. Understood. Great. There are a number of hands coming up. I will just manage traffic for you, but really that was fascinating, terrific, and I think if you ever want a second career as a teacher of physics, among other things, you would be absolutely terrific. So you
I
really
started as a physics major. I gave it up though.
In a way that was super accessible to a wide range of folks. So first up, we have Eric Higginbotham. Eric, over to you.
Thanks very much, Brian. That was terrific. It was, I know it's a complex subject, but extremely clear and interesting. So thank you for all of that. I know as a squadron leader, your answer to pretty much anything is likely to be, well, it depends how good the pilots are. But if I can take you outside of your squadron leader role for a moment and, you know, fast forward 15 years, you're now at RAND or at SSP as faculty or something, and ask you something that's slightly off the topic, but related, and that is, you know, all the open source analysis suggests that as weapons have improved, you know, more engagements on balance will be decided by BVR weapons, you know, long range engagements. So just to give you a a few assumptions. So if we're in a high-end fight somewhere, let's say in Asia, and it's basically a maritime environment, you've got AWACS support, the other guy's got AEW. What percentage, or how many of these fights are going to be decided by the long-range missiles, and how often are you going to wind up in these maneuvering dogfights? Thanks.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll tell you, in the era of shrinking budgets, we're finding reduction in flying hours. We've had to make a lot of difficult calls on what do we use our time and our gas, what missions do we train to. The visual fights, the way I talk through them right now, the way I started it was it's a building block, right? Is that you'll find that if you don't train to these high stress, fast-paced, high G kind of mission sets, you'll actually struggle when it comes to other mission sets that we actually do. So it's not necessarily that we ever expect to have to turn with a flanker or a MiG, but it teaches you how to max perform your jet. It teaches you what the limits are of yourself and of the other of your aircraft. It's a way for us, honestly, to weed out some of the early pilots as well. Is if you can't think at 6, 7 Gs and 400 miles an hour, then I don't know what you're doing here. I absolutely agree that I think we've had one dogfight since Rico's war story there, since Desert Storm. We've had one dogfight, and that's not the way that the future warfare is gonna unfold. What I will tell you though is that in addition to all those long range missiles and everything else, right, electronic warfare is kicking butts, right? If you think that you're gonna have an ID and that you're gonna have the rules of engagement to shoot at long distance on the coast of China when there are airliners everywhere and civilian traffic, it's very possible that the only way you're going to get permission to fire is by getting a visual identification. So we fight that as well.
Great, thanks. Next up, I've got Matt Kansian, sorry.
Hey, thanks. So in the dogfight, to what extent do your initial reactions and sequence vary based on who the aggressor is versus a fulcrum or a flanker? Like, well, I can dive and climb faster than this one, but I can turn faster than that one, so I'm going to do a different thing? Or is it just like we do the same initial thing because you're going to be under so much stress, you have to go so fast, like you might as well just do the same, be programmed to do the same turn and then go up and down?
Yes, it's a good question. We have basic tactics that will work the majority of the time, like what I talked through there. And then for the more advanced kind of experienced pilots, you will have specific tactics to go against specific threats, right? I know that if I'm up against a flanker, that guy can turn way better than I can, right? So there's no way I'm going to win a rate fight. I wouldn't even try it, right? Versus maybe a MiG-21 that's really, really slow. So you absolutely have to employ the right tactic, and it does vary depending on what the threat is. But if you lock up and you don't know what it is, if you execute a basic brake turn and you just look outside, you'll probably be able to start to figure it out from there.
Great, thanks. Let's see, next I think is Ron Siegel. Ron, over to you.
Okay, thank you. I've been wondering how much longer you think these tactics will dominate engagements. We've had AMRAAM for 30 years, and we have to assume the other side has deployed something like it by now. And we're going to see engagements at ranges of 20,000 feet, 50,000 feet, and turn rates are not going to dominate so much as off-bore sight capabilities of missiles and countermeasures and stuff like that. So what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think it's similar to my answer to Eric at the beginning, which is that I don't think they're extremely relevant. Having a jet that turns the fastest, was kind of the knock on the F-22, honestly, was hey, it can defeat any aircraft in the world in a dogfight, right? But frankly, if the F-22 is in a dogfight, you've already screwed up 10 other things, right? The F-35, right? Our newest, shiny penny, it turns like a pig, right? It doesn't have any maneuverability, but it wasn't designed to. It was designed to kill the enemy before you even knew it was there. So I think we understand that we don't need to make the fastest turning aircraft, but as you saw from Rico's war story there, that was an Eagle against a MiG. They had long range missiles and they ended up in a visual engagement. So you still have to have that capability as a backup when you don't know what it is, you don't know if it's friendly or enemy, or frankly, the rules of engagement don't allow you to shoot that AMRAAM. That we find that a lot, is that you just don't have the ability because you're not allowed to.
Great, thanks. Next up, and I apologize if I don't pronounce your name correctly, Predrag, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks for the great talk. I was just curious how all of the stuff you just taught us maybe changes or doesn't change when you account for planes with thrust vectoring capability, where you can point your nose wherever you want, but that comes at other expenses.
Yeah, so the majority of the stuff that I talked through was those were just key concepts, but a lot of the specifics, like when I talked about numbers and angles, airspeed, stuff like that, that was really Eagle specific, right? When you look at the F-22, it has those thrust vectoring nozzles, right? For those who don't understand, is that the engines, you can point the engines, right? Like that is crazy. It adds so much more maneuverability. If you're fighting an aircraft that has thrust vectoring, all those numbers I gave you go out the window, okay? In an Eagle, I cannot fight against an F-22. I cannot fight against an advanced flanker that has thrust vectoring. In a visual engagement, it just won't work. So what we do is we train to kind of like, okay? So if I'm in an Eagle, I'm going to train to something that has similar capabilities. Otherwise, there's no point in trying, honestly. I have fought against an F-22 before. It didn't go well. And it wasn't because he was a better pilot. It's because the F-22 is amazing.
And if you don't mind me asking a follow-up, how does the math change in a head-on closing situation? It's not really clear who the attacker and the defender is, and what happens next.
Yeah. That would be a second IAP briefing I could give you. It's called high aspect Bfm. Instead of defensive, it's called high aspect. And the assumption is that you start in that head-to-head pass at 1,000 miles an hour, and then what, right? And the difference is that you become the offender by doing a better job of doing the things that I said, right? Maneuvering in relation to the Bandit, preserving your energy, figuring out when to turn and when not to. You actually use those concepts to become the offender instead of just to prevent dying as a defender. So it's a little different, but honestly, it's not that different. The fights are just a little bit longer to figure out who's who.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Next, Preston Tower. Preston, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Colonel Novchich. I'm Cadet Tower at MIT AFROTC at 365, and I'm just curious how the throttle setting factors into the energy management throughout the fight, and is there ever a reason to come off full afterburner?
Yeah, that's a good question. So sometimes we have to dispense with reality when we fight, because in training we just plug it into the front max afterburner and we just basically leave it there because that's how the jet turns the best. In real life, your countermeasures, right? Those flares, they're not going to work very well if you're in full afterburner because your engines are hotter than the flares are. So in real life, you're absolutely going to have to pull your throttles back in order for your countermeasures to work. And you're going to have to pull your throttles back because more than likely, if I'm flying in combat, I'm probably going to be very fast. So I'm not going to just be able to just plug it into afterburner. There are times, I joke, but we had that video at the beginning with Maverick, right, where he did the reversal maneuver. There are absolutely times where I, as the defender, I can get the jump on the offender and confuse him because I just slow down as fast as possible and he can't handle it. He'll shoot out in front of me. So there are definitely times where you can't forget about the left hand while you're doing everything with the right hand. So it's a good question. Good pilots will use both.
Fascinating. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Next, Trevor. Trevor, over to you.
Hey, no fair questions.
Yeah, all right, here we go. Great brief, by the way, buddy. You know, I noticed that for an Air Force brief, you had many Navy references in there, including Top Gun and aircraft carrier. So it gets my thumbs up. We see where Legion's
Air Force makes a good fighter pilot movie. I'm stuck.
Yeah, I let the weapons school comment pass. Hey, just kind of not to put you on the spot, but a question. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, and maybe, you know, if there's a official Air Force position on it, you can say that as well. You know, as we look at the, you know, now 6th gen fighters, next generation air dominance program that's going on right now, you know, I kind of think about, hey, in 20 to 30 years, are we going to have a man in the cockpit of a fighter aircraft? And my question would be, if the answer is yes, why? Right? I just turn that over to you and get your thoughts on that.
Extremely relevant question. So I don't know how much you guys follow this, but if you're familiar, this was about 6 or 7 months ago. DARPA proved that their AI, so a computer algorithm, beat a fighter pilot in a one-on-one visual engagement, right? They actually beat him very handily, right? The computer won 5 times to 0 over a very experienced weapons school graduate F-16 pilot. And it brings up all these questions about, hey, you know, they figured it out. Fighter pilots are gone. There's no way you can compete with a computer when it comes to that stuff. There's qualifications to that answer, right? The first thing first, I love DARPA. I got to work with DARPA a lot when I was at the Pentagon. I have massive amounts of respect for what they do. That was a setup, okay? It was a setup. It was a lot of PR, okay? Because it was in a simulator, first of all, okay? If any pilot who has flown BFM in a simulator knows that it is the worst thing you can do. There's no feel, there's no feedback from the airplane. It's extremely difficult to perform correctly or to turn correctly. You're a hot mess, right? Whereas the computer had intimate expert knowledge of everything that was happening, right? So it was a little bit unfair to begin with. But let's just assume, fast forward, you can put that in an actual airplane. I have no doubt that a computer can perform visual maneuvers better than a human, right? You remove the weakest link, right? Physically, you could design an airplane that doesn't have to worry about killing its occupant. That airplane will maneuver to insane limits. This is the problem, though, is that I have never been in a situation in all my years of flying in combat. I've got over 1,000 combat hours. I have never been in a situation where it was so clear cut to kill somebody that a computer could do it, right? You always have to have the decision maker. There has to be somebody who can fight through kind of the fog of war, if you will, to figure out if someone's going to die or somebody's going to live. And I think that's the big difference, is that is there going to be a human in the cockpit? I think for a while, I think there's probably one more generation of fighter pilot out there. You know, my kids are kind of that between 9 and 12 years old. I think they can still become fighter pilots. And then we're going to figure out how to do it outside of the cockpit. I think there's still going to be somebody flying that jet, flying it. They just won't be in the aircraft. But man, the rules of engagement are so incredibly hard to navigate, and the situation is never clear. I would never trust a robot to figure out whether somebody lives or dies.
Great, thanks. Let's see, next, Rich Nielsen. We don't have any pilots, I think, in the department, but we do have a surfer. Rich also surfs in the middle of winter, apparently, in New England. So
same thing.
That's about as good as we can do, Brian. But I'm sure I'll have a great question. Rich, over to you.
I wasn't expecting the introduction. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about G-forces on the wave because that's what I'm here for. No, so I'm curious about back to the basics of what you were talking about. It seemed like in that war story video at the end, there was a lot of talk, and it may have just been the Smithsonian commentators getting it wrong about the radar and like, you know, messing up the radar in the close engagement. What I thought you saying was that basically the instruments, you don't even look at them. And like the videos also showed people not looking at the instruments. What's the breakdown there, I guess, of like, would you ever look at an instrument during the dogfight? Like, when are you doing that? Like, when does it feel? Like, how much, like what's...
Sure. So if you are trying to shoot the weapon, the majority of the time, you still need to have a sensor on your airplane that cues that weapon to the target. In that, you know, Desert Storm, all they had was radars, right? Like if you wanted to shoot a missile, you had to have your radar locked into that aircraft. So from a defender's perspective, I don't have anything looking behind me, so my instruments don't matter, right? But as the offender, absolutely. If I can't get a radar lock on you, I can't shoot you. Nowadays, we do have other sensors, right? We have these fancy helmets that basically everywhere I look, it cues my missile. So my missile literally follows my eyes, which is pretty amazing. So I actually don't have to have a radar nowadays. I can just look at you and shoot you, which is pretty cool. But that's the difference between what the Smithsonian video was talking about.
Great, thanks. So our last question will be from Scott, and then I think we'll wrap up. So Scott, over to you.
Hey, Brian, great brief, brother. Mine's kind of I'm gonna call it a two-part. You've done a lot of combat hours. Could you talk about the complexity of flying in an environment that has coalition and potentially Russian planes? And because you've been dancing around the topic a little bit about how difficult it is to be in that kind of environment. And do you ever get a chance to fly against Russian planes, I guess, or have to wear them off? And could you talk through that? Thanks.
Yeah. So my last deployment that I just came back from was, you know, it was essentially, you know, policing the Syrian deconfliction line, right, between us and Russia. We had a lot of run-ins with Russian aircraft, Syrian aircraft, even other aircraft like Iranian aircraft. And it really highlighted more than any time in my career how difficult it is to navigate rules of engagement. The Russians, for example, even though, you know, kind of the media would make it seem like, you know, oh, it's us against Russia. We have when I came back from Syria, we had a perfectly friendly, deconflicted airspace plan, right? You don't mess with us, we don't mess with you. If you come over on my side of the line, it means that there was a phone call between some very high-ranking people, and it's all cool. The problem is that when somebody starts making a mistake, right, is that those mistakes can snowball. Okay, I'll give you an example. This was it was in 2018. The Navy, a lieutenant commander, got the first air-to-air kill in 20 years when he shot down a Syrian Su-22 in the same place that I flew 500 hours over. The issue was that that Syrian aircraft didn't really know where he was. He didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know that he was over friendly American troops. He didn't know that the bomb he just dropped was right next to some special forces guys. And so because of his errors, we had to now go through our litany of rules to figure out, is he hostile? Where is he? Am I allowed to shoot him? What radio calls do I have to make? What permission do I need to get in order to shoot him? And that whole time, you're in a turning engagement so that you can maintain a position of advantage, right? I've had friends that have been, that have done that with the Russians, where the Russians have crossed the line, whether they didn't know where they were or it was an accident, and you end up turning. And the only thing preventing somebody from dying is honestly just good professional aviation, where you know that you're not supposed to, you know the rules of engagement, you know the authority for shooting, and ultimately it just comes down to following the rules. So it was such a complex scenario in Iraq and Syria with all the different countries and the different rules and the different scenarios that you had to run into. We trained for months just to figure out the rules of who's good and who's bad in what situation. Nothing like seeing an advanced flanker roll up behind you and wondering if this is the last, or if you're allowed to turn. It's very strange.
I bet. Well, thank you so much, Brian. That was absolutely terrific. And just to plug the last few panels, I think we're next Tuesday and next Thursday. So if you've liked this series, please come back and tune in. Next week, we'll cover, Scott's going to look at our sort of partnerships with foreign militaries, and then Trevor's going to look at freedom of navigation operations. So we're going to get a good, healthy operational dose here to wrap things up. Otherwise, please unmute yourself and join me in thanking Brian for